Anyone else so busy these days that it can be hard to find the time to shop, yet alone pick out a good outfit? That's where Armoire comes in. With a clothing rental membership, you can effortlessly turn heads with stylish, everyday looks tailored just for you. In the last couple months, we've done so many book events, and I don't know what I would have done without Armoire. It's been my literal lifesaver, where I can try all sorts of clothing and swap them out if they aren't the right fit, or if I just want different styles. What I love the most is trying new pieces I wouldn't necessarily want to commit to buying, like wide-leg jeans or blazers. Sometimes it's been a no, but other times I've been pleasantly surprised, and I've loved expanding my style a bit with Armoire. Right now, our listeners can give Armoire a try and get up to 50% off their first month. That's up to $125 off. Just visit armoire.style/dateable. That's armoire.style, ARMOIRE.style/dateable to get up to 50% off your first month and never worry about what to wear again. Try Armoire today. Let's talk about the choices we make because they matter. From the food we eat to the products we bring into our homes, every decision has an impact. And one of the biggest, where you sleep. That's exactly why I love Avocado Green Mattress. Their mattresses are crafted with certified organic materials designed to stand the test of time. Because sustainability isn't just about what we buy, it's about buying better. I recently tried out the Avocado Green Mattress, their bestseller that comes in 3 comfort options. My partner and I went into the store and we were lying there and really could not decide between the firm and the medium options. They were both just so comfortable. I guess we'll have to go back for another test drive. I love that they have this try before you buy option where you can visit one of their retail stores or premier retail partners to experience the comfort in person. And Avocado has easy financing options with a firm that makes your purchase way more accessible. Head to avocadomattress.com today and save up to 10% on certified organic mattresses. Dream of better for you and the planet. And I'm Julie Kraftchick,
Dating Insiders,
here to dive into everything modern dating and relationships.
Welcome to Dateable. Hello, friends.
Welcome back to Dateable.
We are gearing up for Julie's bachelorette this week. The collective we. It's not just the two of us, but all of us, all of you listening. You're going to be there with us in spirit this weekend. Julie, are you pumped?
I am.
You ready to go?
I'm really excited. It's kind of fun because I'm such a planner, especially on trips.
Yeah.
That I keep like wanting to be like, does everyone have a ride? Does everyone have a carpool? And I'm like, I need to not be involved. Other people are handling this, and this isn't my issue. And that's kind of nice. I think I have like a rough idea of like some things that are happening, but I don't know most of the details, which is also kind of nice.
I just found out about one surprise.
Oh, okay.
I'm personally excited about. That I think you're just gonna, I don't know. I think you might be speechless by this surprise in such a good way, but I think it's brilliant. Whoever thought of this, one of your friends thought of this surprise, and I got to hand it to her. It's pretty
I love
good.
it. I love it. Okay, I'm so excited. It's going to be really fun. I think it's just all becoming very real. Like I remember when my best friend Kate, I'll give her the shout out because she's been the planner extraordinaire. I think I've been so lucky that there's been a whole group of people planning, but she's been kind of the ringleader on everything. And when she like reached out, I feel like it was like not that much past when I started really doing wedding planning. She's like, we got to get the bachelorette on the books. And I'm like, oh, I can't like think about this right now. There's so much going on. And she kind of kept hounding me on it. And I'm so glad she did because it does sneak up fast and people book travel. Yes. And you really do need to get ahead of it, especially when you have like a large group of people coming. So I'm so like grateful that she was like on me because I feel like if I didn't have someone on me, I would have like slipped on it.
You know, she has been planning this since you were in your 20s.
Yes.
So I think she's had quite the head start.
She really has.
Even from the first email we all got from Kate, it was like planned to the minute.
You're like, what are we helping with? It looks like we're good. Yeah.
This looks pretty much thought out. Like this looks, I mean, obviously there's so many surprises and there's so many unknowns, but the skeleton of the Bachelorette she had already built. And this girl's been planning. She is so ready.
It's kind of funny because I feel like when I was like single, like in my late 30s, like I feel like she not gave up a little, but she was kind of like, do you want me to just like plan a Bachelorette without you getting married? And I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm ready for that right now.
I'm not ready to throw in the towel just yet,
but she was ready to do it, even without any sort of marriage on the horizon, partner, anything. She was ready to go.
You know, I got to hand it to Kate. She is such a good multitasker and planner, and she's thought of everything while raising 2 kids and working a full-time job. And I just think some people thrive in that sort of environment, which leads us to today's topic, which is having polyamorous relationships and managing many relationships in your life.
Best transition ever.
Some people are cut out for it and some people may not be cut out for it. I guess you don't know till you try. But I would say that Kate, I mean, she's not poly, but she might thrive in a poly relationship.
You have to be a good planner. That's for damn sure. I do love this conversation though that we had today. We'll transition and we'll do a Bachelorette recap later. Don't you worry. Yeah. We'll find a place to do it. We'll see if it warrants an entire brunch talk or if it's just in an intro. I guess it depends how much crazy shit happens. TBD. We'll find out. But I feel like with this, we were really excited to actually do a swap. We were on their podcast, Multi-Amory, as well. So we have our first ever fivesome. Is that correct? Or have we had a fivesome? It might be. What is that even called? A quad is 4? Like a quintet? Is there a name for that?
What is a fivesome called? A quintet.
A quintet. Yeah. Okay. We were lucky to be joined with the 3 hosts of the Multi-Amory podcast, Dedeker, Emily, and Chase. I think, we're happy to have our first official fivesome.
Quintet. We know the official title. I mean, their content is suitable for obviously anybody who's into non-monogamy, from casual dating to queer platonic partnerships, married couples living separately. I mean, there's so many different configurations, but I also think this conversation applies to anybody who's monogamous too, because it really is just about intentional, conscious dating. Mm-hmm. And that's what you are forced to do when you're balancing multiple relationships. But sometimes in a monogamous relationship, we take that for granted.
Yeah. And I think why UA and I really resonate with them and why we wanted to collaborate is that we have this same kind of feeling of like, you get to design the relationship that works for you. Even if you're monogamous, I feel like you don't have to do it the exact same way your friends do a partnership. Like, I feel like I'm like in this right now. I'm like trying to figure out finances, right? Like that's going to be a change of like how I am pre-marriage to marriage. It's been probably the largest change in my opinion. Mm-hmm. But I've asked a lot of my friends, how do you do it? Just to understand. And some people I'm like, oop, not for me. And then others I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'll take a little of that. So I think with any type of relationship, whether it's monogamous or non-monogamous, in today's world, 2025, we are at the driver's seat. We get to define it. And I think that's actually very liberating and freeing that you and your partner can do what works for you instead of falling into like this mold of what you think you're supposed to do in a relationship.
And that really is the key of modern dating is like, we've kind of gotten to a point where we've become really judgmental of people's choices, like especially with non-monogamy. There's just been a lot of judgment around people who don't choose a traditional route. But the way you just described it, Julie, is because we get to choose our own path, now's our time to observe what everybody else has done. Yeah. And then we can piecemeal together kind of the relationship format that works the best for us. And what works for other people is not for us to judge first and foremost, but also it's such a great way for us to have that first reaction, like to hear, how someone is doing the relationship. And if your gut's like, ooh, that's definitely not something I'm into, like that's great information for you to know. But it's not about information about whether that person's made the right choice or not.
I just remember like when we first started this podcast 10 years ago, we were different people. And I feel like, you know, polyamory was becoming more known, especially in San Francisco, but it wasn't as mainstream as it is now. I think it's built a lot of momentum, and clearly podcasts like Multi-Amory have contributed to that. They've also been, like us, around for 10 years, a decade long of really exploring like how to do love differently. So I think all of these resources, though, have normalized it a lot more. I get like, depending on your environment, your exposure, some things might seem like more out there than others. But I think at least for the two of us, we've definitely, like when people tell me about a crazy situation or what they perceive as crazy, I'm just like, look, if someone's down for it, who cares?
Yeah.
Even like, I'm thinking of like that monologue in White Lotus. I'm like, look, if that makes him happy, go for it, you know?
Oh my gosh, yes. Sex life of a middle-aged white man in Thailand, if you know what we're getting at.
But it's like, it doesn't mean it has to be for you, but I just like feel like I've become a lot more judgment-free of others. And I remember like when you and I first started doing Dateable, one of the things that we said that we really liked, we spoke with a lot of like poly couples and people that were doing more non-monogamous arrangements. We said that we really loved how you get to optimize your dating life. And like, you get to create what works for you. And that, I think both of us, was very inspirational. And I remember even we were writing our book, we were sitting together and we were thinking about like what really impacted us, like what changed us. And I remember you even saying that, like, I felt like I now have the power to do what works for me. And I don't feel as like constrained as like maybe I did before in a relationship.
And also to recognize that everything ebbs and flows and everything's dynamic. Even in our conversation today with the three hosts of Multi-Amory, they've all been through phases of monogamy and then phases of non-monogamy, and they come back and then they weave in and out. And one of the hosts was actually in a very long-term monogamous relationship. So it just shows that whatever path you choose, it's not a one-size-fits-all, and it may not fit you for the rest of your life. So you can constantly be iterating and molding yourself to what works best for you.
So one thing I love about editing our podcast, because I'm back to editing it right now, is that it actually lets me think about it a little more because you're hearing it for a long time. And I was pondering this and I wanted to get your take on it, because I think what's interesting in non-monogamy is there's so many different labels for different approaches, right? You have like hierarchical and like solo polyamory. Like there's all these different like ways to do it. And they all come with like a definition more. And then in monogamy, you kind of just have this catch-all of like, you're monogamous. And on one side, I feel like putting labels and defining everything isn't always ideal because it like makes it too like restrictive. But then on the other side, I think what's missing in monogamy that might be contributing to why dating is so hard is lack of structure. So I'm wondering, like, does it make sense to like bring some of this into monogamy? And this is more of a, I don't know, just thought experiment, not necessarily something we'll solve today, but it's like, could you be like, okay, there is a form of monogamy where you never ever cohabitate, and that's cool and that's accepted and that has a label, and people are like, oh yeah, they're doing the individual living monogamy. I don't know, I'm just making stuff up, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I think that stuff kind of falls into polyamory, which is interesting because it goes into non-traditional relationships, but it's still monogamous. It's a monogamous dynamic. So I like where you're going with that, Julie. Maybe monogamy, why it's so challenging right now is that we either have situationships or you have a monogamous relationship.
Right. There's nothing in between.
There's really nothing in between. So you're in a committed relationship or you're fucked. I mean, that's what we're basically saying. But what if we made situationships into a form of monogamy that could be like, I don't know, temporary monogamy, or brainstorming here. But yeah, maybe we need to bring in a little bit of that non-traditional thinking into monogamy so we can normalize the many variations of monogamous relationships all of us are having.
So maybe listeners and everyone listening, after you listen to this episode, let us know what you think. Is it more constraining to have labels on different types of monogamy? Or is it actually like giving you the guidelines and maybe some of the direction that's lost right now? I'd love to hear people's opinions.
Yeah. Some food for thought. Maybe you're monogamously only having sex with one person. Maybe not a relationship, but back in the day, that would have been friends with benefits. But maybe this is a monogamous, committed sex relationship. Or we have a friend who is in a marriage, living apart from her husband, and she feels very apprehensive about telling people about it because people will judge her for it. But maybe that is a category in itself. So yeah, maybe you're going through something right now that if there was an actual category or label for it, it would help normalize your situation.
Like the modern day DINK, dual income, no kids.
There's, in China, DINK has made its way to China, and it's like the direct translation of DINK in China. It's like direct translation from the English version. So it's so weird. Like
what,
people are talking about it.
Like no dual income, no kids. Like they say that.
Yeah, there's a word for it. There's a word for it, but that basically like directly translates to DINK. It's so weird. But yes, something like DINK.
Yeah.
We'll get that in.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm excited to dive in. This is such a great episode. If you haven't already got the book, of course, this is the reminder, How to Be Dateable. Pick it up wherever books are sold, audiobook. If you're also into what you're hearing today, there's the Multi-Amory book, Multi-Amory Essential Tools for Modern Relationships. And this was actually selected by the New York Times as an essential read on non-monogamy. So if you are there being like, I don't know if monogamy is for me, pick that up. And of course, How to Be Dateable. We encourage everyone to figure out what is the relationship that works for them and to date with that intention in mind.
And just very quickly, we've done some book events the last couple of weeks. We've met so many amazing people. I have a short list of people just to give a shout out to. Jen, Beth, Elizabeth, Steve, Kendall, Ellie, Alexandra's dad, Elaine, Eric, 2 Alexes, and Benji. This is not an exhaustive list, but I just want to give a quick shout out to those of you who came out to support. And it was so nice meeting you all.
I just love that you said Alexandra's dad.
We never got his name.
We'll get into that story on another episode, but I'm glad you jotted those down. Well, before we get into it, let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors.
I am so relieved to say that the days where shapewear feel like torture devices are over. Seriously, who invented those things? They were so uncomfortable. But now, have you discovered Skims? Because I'm a Skims believer, and it's just too good to keep all to myself. The Fits Everybody collection from Skims is like nothing I've ever tried before. And here's a funny story. When I first got the cheeky bikini underwear, I thought they had sent me kid sizes because of how small they looked. I was like, this is not going to fit me. But then I was shocked that they stretch to mold to my body, and they're so comfortable. I feel like I'm wearing nothing at all. And best of all, I found the perfect color to match my skin. So these undies don't show through any white pants. Skims truly live up to the hype. Shop Skims Fits Everybody collection and more at skims.com. After you place your order, be sure to let them know that we sent you. Select podcast in the survey and be sure to select Dateable in the drop-down menu that follows.
As we're headed into summer, I feel that familiar urge to refresh my closet, but I'm not wasting money on pieces I'll only wear once or for just one season. With Quince, everything is half the cost of similar brands. By working directly with top artisans and cutting out the middleman, Quince gives you luxury without the markup, like 100% European linen shorts and dresses from $30, luxe swimwear, and so much more. I have my eye on their Italian leather platform sandals in cashew and may just be getting these in time for my bachelorette party. Their clothes are timeless, lightweight, and far more elevated than anything else at this price. Give your summer closet an upgrade with Quince. Go to quince.com/dateable for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/dateable to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/dateable. Okay, let's get into our chat with Multi-Amory.
For the first time in Dateable history, we are having a fivesome, which is probably the most kinky we'll ever get on this show. I'm just saying that right now for the record.
That's modern dating.
And what better people do we have than you all?
Yes, absolutely. It's a party of five. Who wants to be Jennifer Love Hewitt? Raise your hand. But so happy to have our fivesome party today because we are going to be talking about different ways of having relationships and some non-traditional ways of DIYing the love life that you've always wanted. So we have the host of the popular podcast, Multi-Amory, here. When I say your name, just give a little hey so our audience can hear your sexy voices. Dedeker.
Oh, hi. I'm Dedeker. I'm the resident Virgo of the podcast, here to represent.
Oh, I don't know if you can top that, Jace.
Hi, I'm Jace. I'm the resident male of the podcast.
And Emily.
Hi there, I'm Emily. I'm the low voiced one, I guess, and the vegan. So
the one with the actual sexy voice between the three of us.
That's very kind. I think all of us have nice voices.
I think you all do. I was just going to say, I feel like you all have very sexy voices, and we're so excited to hear from all of you what your stories are, because I feel like you have quite the story of how you all met. And clearly you all have been doing this podcast for so long, like 10 years, close to a decade, like the two of us, and probably a lot has changed for you. So maybe we can hear from Dedeker first about your story, like how you all met and how you describe your relationship style then and now.
Yeah, I can get the ball rolling. So my origin story for non-monogamy in particular, it goes back to when I was in high school, actually. And I was raised very conservative evangelical Christian, actually. And look how far I've come. But in high school was when I was first starting to learn, as many of us do, like, what is this whole romantic relationship thing all about? You know, I think of it as a time was when I was first like playing around with what an adult relationship could be. And not only was it my first experience of relationship, but it was also my first experience of being in a relationship with somebody, but then developing a crush on somebody else at the same time. And having this experience of, oh, I'm actually interested in two people at once. And like most of us, I didn't have any models for dating or relationships that really accounted for that fact. I think that kids today maybe have more models, more people talking about this, more people normalizing this. But at the time, you know, all of my models for relationships were either based on what the church was telling me or on what Disney movies were telling me. And the main message there was that if you're in a relationship with somebody and if you actually love them, you just naturally have blinders on and you don't get interested in anybody else. Like, that's how you know that you love them, is because you quite naturally, for some reason, stop being attracted to anybody else. And at that very tender age, I really internalized that phenomenon as meaning there's something wrong with me. There's something broken about me that I would experience this. And so for myself, as I, you know, rocketed into young adulthood, I went through the cycle that a lot of people do of this like serial overlapping monogamy, right? Of like, you date someone, I develop interest in somebody else, and then that interest would be just like juicy enough that I would kind of have to come up with a reason why this person I'm currently dating isn't working for me. So then I would dump them, move on to the new hotness, and then the same cycle would continue, right? Of just on and on and on and on. And then when I was in my early 20s, some sort of voice started coming in to where I started to realize that this isn't sustainable. You know, there's something about this doesn't feel right. I would fall into like these deep depressions of feeling like there's something wrong with me. I can't deal with this. And in my early 20s, my best friend, who is a gay man, very naturally was like, well, have you just thought about having an open relationship at some point? And I was really offended at the suggestion, to be honest. Like at that time, I associated open relationships with, that's just for people who are not committed to each other. That is for people who are sex addicts. That's for people who like are too afraid to be in a committed relationship. An open relationship, that is not for me. But then I immediately went home and Googled it. And that started this multi-years long research project of trying to get to the bottom of not only what does an open relationship, what does a non-monogamous relationship look like, but like what actually gets it to function. Without going into like my own trials and tribulations specifically, I can kind of fast forward a little bit to, I was a few years into this whole like non-monogamy open relationship exploration. I had a partner at the time who, at that time I was still using this label of like, oh, this is my primary partner. We were both dating other people. And my partner ended up going on a date with Emily, actually. He met Emily on OkCupid.
Love it.
Emily and Jace had been living together, and they were in a monogamous relationship, and they had also relatively recently opened up their relationship. And then I feel like it was sort of a little bit of this through the grapevine that, Emily, weren't you the one who mentioned to my partner that you thought that I would be into Jace or something like that?
So Jace, I believe, had seen you on OkCupid because at that time you were able to link to another person on OkCupid like, this is my partner, my singular singular partner, as opposed to potentially being able to have multiple people on there. That was revolutionary.
Back in the day, again, OkCupid was only a website, right?
Yes.
And even back then, it was still this like very hacky way that the non-monogamous community had come up with to try to make OkCupid more non-monogamy friendly.
Sure.
So it's like you could essentially, the way that you might hyperlink to something in your profile, whether it's like, I don't know, go check out my portfolio or something like that you'd find a way to hyperlink to like your partner's profile on OkCupid as a means of signaling to people, hey, I'm in this open relationship.
Also with someone else.
It is open. You can go see my partner's profile. You can talk to them if you want. So that's just a little bit of context of what was going on within the subculture. Within the subculture of non-monogamous dating at that time.
So Jace and Emily, you two were a couple when you all started. Jace, take us through that, where you all were.
Right. Yeah. So like Dedeker mentioned, Emily and I had been in a monogamous relationship for like a couple years at that point.
Yeah, maybe 3.
Wow.
Yeah, maybe 3 years or so.
Time.
We'd been living together, and we had somewhat recently before this opened up our relationship. And that was all part of this. We didn't even know the word polyamory at the time. It was kind of this, we're going to try to figure this thing out, which led to a lot of reading and trying to figure out what we were doing and how to do it right. But then, sometime fairly early in that process, like within the first year or so, Emily went on this date with Dedeker's partner at the time. And she came home from that and was like, oh yeah, I had a nice time. And he has a partner who I think you'd be into. Like, this is her, profile name. And I looked her up. I was like, oh, I've seen this profile and have it saved, but haven't written a message yet. And then before I could even write a message, actually Dedeker sent me a message because I guess she had gotten a similar thing back from her partner. Yeah. So she sent me a message being like, hey, weird that we haven't met on here before. How's it going? And then from there, we ended up going on a date and starting a relationship there. So there were kind of those 2 established relationships and then these 2 newer relationships, which was mine and Dedeker's, and then Emily with that other partner.
So for a while, it was like a little bit of a quad.
Okay. So what year was this? Because you said that you didn't know what polyamory was, or it wasn't like a mainstream.
2013?
2013. Okay.
So the term was out there and around, but it wasn't like commonplace, right?
And Jace, can you rewind to why, or I guess Emily too, what prompted the discussion to open up the relationship?
I think in a lot of ways it was getting to a point in the relationship where we were both like a little complacent, a little, this is fun. We're enjoying, our time together, but it's feeling like it's not as sparky maybe as it once was. So challenges from that standpoint. And I remember, Jace, you saying something like, I really love and care about Emily, but I know like she's not going to be the last person that I ever sleep with, for instance. We broke up for a week. And then in that week, I think Jace went on a couple dates or went on one date. And then we were still living together, which is challenging. But we ended up like, being able to talk a lot in that week about what it is that we wanted, and ended up sleeping together again in that like week that we were broken up, and it was really hot and heavy. And
it's because becoming friends makes the sex hotter. That's really
exactly.
Yeah. But from, that experience, we realized, hey, we were getting to say things that we weren't able to say when we were together, because there's a lot of implication and there's a lot of challenge there, and really being honest about what it is that you need and want in your feelings. And we realized that we still wanted to be together, but that we wanted the option to also maybe be around and be with other people. So, Jace, you had heard about the possibility of non-monogamy, but not the word polyamory. Yeah, from some of your own stuff that you had looked up in college, correct?
Well, so it was actually that first person that I went on a date with.
Yeah.
When I kind of described what it is that we were doing and trying to figure out. She's like, oh, you should read some of these books and recommended like the classics, right? Which is like The Ethical Slut, Sex at Dawn, More Than Two were kind of the only 3 real books at the time on the subject.
More Than Two wasn't even out yet.
Oh, you're right. That wasn't even out yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just The Ethical Slut and Sex at Dawn, which is more of like a research-based book. It's not about how to do non-monogamy, but more about how humans might be wired for it. But anyway, yeah, those were what opened up that idea of, oh, this is actually a thing people do. It isn't just something someone does in like the death throes of their relationship before they get divorced or something.
Although a lot of people do it that way.
Yes,
sure. A lot of people still do that as well. Yeah.
What strikes me as so fascinating but also resonant is that you two were in a 3-year relationship, and you got to a point where you felt like things were kind of like blah. Because we all get there in a relationship, the complacency and also the lack of the spark. But for most couples, they probably would just accept that and say, well, this is just part of a long-term relationship. And then things will ebb and flow, and we can discover that as we go along. But the two of you were like, actually, no, there is another solution to this, and we're going to try to find that. So that's really interesting that you were able to pursue that route. So when you did open up the relationship, the 4 of you became involved. What did a quad, what did that look like exactly?
Oh, well, for a while, I think we went through a phase that we now know a lot of people who explore non-monogamy, a phase a lot of people go through, which is like once you get through some of the initial obstacles and stumbling blocks and some of the deprogramming, and once you finally reach a point where it feels like, oh, it's working and everyone seems like they're relatively happy, that then you enter the phase of thinking like you've unlocked relationship godhood and you've solved every single problem. And so it was a lot of
everything.
Rolling up to parties as a quad, feeling like we are like the hottest shit ever. And
yeah, like the Kill Bill music plays and slow motion starts when we come in. It's like that, Bow,
so
bow,
good. Yeah. And this is, to be like, in my opinion, I think a lot of the people who find non-monogamous or polyamorous people online very annoying, I think it's because
they're in that phase.
A lot of people are in that phase of thinking, I've
holier
solved it.
than thou. Yes.
Exactly. I've reached enlightenment. All of you messed up toxic monogamous people, if you could just get with the program. To be fair, that is really annoying, and annoying even to us. Right?
Yes.
Right. But we went through that phase. Yeah.
We went through that phase. Yes. We went through that phase. And then what was after that phase was the fact that quads in particular tend to be notoriously unstable. Group relationships and group dynamics in general tend to be unstable. And it is kind of this funny thing that the media coverage of non-monogamy really likes to hyper-focus on like the triad, the throuple, the quad, the 3 parents who are trying to raise a child together. And the irony is that those relationships do exist, but they're by and large the minority of non-monogamous relationships. Like the way that most people practice non-monogamy, and this is research backed. This isn't just anecdotal. This is based on survey data that most people practice what's best described as like interlinking, interconnected dyads, right? So it's like I have a partner, my partner is dating somebody else, that person's dating somebody else, right? But we're not all necessarily in like a big cult-like group relationship.
Right. It's more like one-on-one, but with many.
Yeah, it's multiple dyads. That's the majority of how people practice, and there are these sort of outliers of people who manage to make it work as a triad, a throuple, or quad, or whatever, but they're definitely the minority.
Can I ask a maybe stupid question, but I'll put it out there anyways?
Of course.
Sure.
For your quad, like what was the relationship like between all of you? Like was there like Emily and Dedeker, did you two have a relationship, for instance? And Jason,
Jason, the other person, never had a relationship. So everyone else was linked, but the two of you were not. And that was basically the only part of the quad that was not really linked, with the exception of the fact that the two of you were often around each other, but in a romantic sense, in a sex sense, that didn't ever happen. Yeah. But no, Dedeker and I definitely did.
But we should clarify it didn't start that way.
That is true.
And that was not like the goal from the outset. It was just there was this couple existing that was Jason and Emily, and there was this other couple existing that was Dedeker and her partner, and that it was then kind of about those other two relationships. And because it was the 4 of us, we would often try to schedule those together because it just made practical sense from like, you're going to spend the night. Why don't you guys also do a sleepover? And that just works out easier than having to work out someone else's schedule or figure out a place to stay if we wanted to do that. But that was the outset. And that was, I would say, fair amount of the relationship was that. It was only later that Dedeker and Emily ended up developing their own relationship with each other. Meanwhile, I also dated other people. Emily dated other people. Dedeker had other relationships. So again, I think when we talk about the quad, because of how the media loves to focus on those group relationships, people can fixate on thinking that was sort of your whole existence was that, but it wasn't.
Or
Again,
like a giant orgy with all of you.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
what happened to the fourth?
Well, so that kind of brings us to talking about the birth of the podcast, as it were.
Okay.
Which it was Jace's idea to do a podcast. And remember, we were still in this phase of like, oh my God, we figured out all relationships. Like, of course we're going to do a podcast.
People need to know.
People need to know.
Things that we know now.
Did you get humbled real quick?
Yes.
That was
No, we did get humbled really quick because so the first thing that happened is like my partner, he was not ready to be out at that level because it very quickly prompted this conversation between Emily and Jason and myself around, do we use our real names on this podcast or do we use a pseudonym? At that time, there was only really one other major podcast that had been talking about non-monogamy and polyamory, and they used pseudonyms, and it was for a very good reason, right? They both the hosts of that show were in jobs where they could stand to lose their jobs. There were definitely consequences for them to be out in that particular way. So that was a serious discussion, and we ended up coming to the conclusion that no, we want to use our real names because actually part of this is that we want to normalize this, and we don't want to treat this like this is something that just happens in the bedroom. This is something that needs to be hidden. Like we actually want to be out in that particular way. So as a part of that conversation, you know, my partner wasn't quite ready for that. The three of us moved forward with the podcast. And then that's when the real humbling began, which is then when the relationship started to implode. You know, I had many fallings out with that partner, right? So we had a catastrophic breakup. Emily and Jace ended up breaking up.
I broke up with him too.
With that other partner.
With that other partner.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
okay.
You know,
a lot of breakups.
like,
All of them fell apart pretty much.
It was a series of chain explosions, you know, everything fell apart. And in the midst of it, the three of us were still showing up to do the podcast as well.
wow.
Yeah.
And then Dedeker and Emily, you two also broke up?
Yes.
Yeah, it was kind of the situation also that was happening was that I was starting a relationship with somebody else who ended up being my monogamous partner of 9 years after all of this happened, or kind of in the midst of this happening. So as things were sort of imploding within the quad, I, you know, was moving to this space of being really enamored with this new person and sort of changing my life in a very profound way for that person, which included, you know, Jason and I breaking up, and then Dedeker, even I think that you said to me at the time, you're like, well, maybe you need to be monogamous for a while. And so we broke up as well. However, again, like she said, we decided this podcast is important enough to us and the relationship with one another was important enough to us that we wanted to continue doing that and continue bringing some of this information to people out there, even though it was really difficult. It's really difficult to be going through a very emotional time in your life with two people that you still really care about, but that you're not in the same configuration with, and also do work with them on a weekly basis.
Yeah, we would, I mean, I know I have memories in those early days of like sometimes we would record an episode together and then like one of us would end up crying.
Oh, wow.
And then like at the end of recording, we have to sit and we have to process. But I think it was the combination of both the subject matter of the stuff that we were talking about and then also the fact that it's like, yeah, we're still the three of us in a room together and really being forced to have to sit and process these things that laid a pathway for us to be able to continue instead of completely abandoning the whole project.
I think something that I just wanted to point out real quick with that is that I think part of why we were able to keep it going, besides just that we were committed to it and cared a lot about each other, was that our podcast was never about our own personal lives.
Yeah.
It was about relationships more generally, about communication and about how to structure non-monogamy and kind of how people are doing it. And so I think if it had been one of those shows, and there's others out there like this, that's like our adventure in non-monogamy. It's about a couple's story opening up. They do this podcast together. We've seen a lot of those where something bad happens and it just dies. The podcast goes away because it has to be focused around that. And if that were what we had done, it all would have fallen apart then. So like, we can't talk about this. So we actually ended up recording for quite a while, several months before we ever talked about like the breakups and stuff happening, because that wasn't the point of our show. It's like we wanted to have learned something from it first before sharing about it. So it's not like this raw tell-all about our personal lives.
So I guess that actually brings me to the next question. Emily, I do want to go back later to you going to become monogamous. So we won't forget about that. But I guess like there's just so many configurations of non-monogamy. And what you were all talking about is the media likes to glamorize certain ones. What have you learned on the podcast of, I guess, the many types of monogamy, or the many types of non-monogamy that are possible? And then also in your personal journeys, like how did you figure out like what was right for you and like what trial and error happened?
Can I just jump on your slip where you said the many types of monogamy? Because I think that's actually accurate too. There's true. There's a wide palette to monogamy, and people I think get into trouble when they think that there's only one type of monogamy, and it's what I'm thinking of counts as monogamy. And I just assume that this person I'm dating, like you're monogamous, you're thinking of the same exact thing as I am, when maybe you're not.
I love that. So maybe
absolutely.
Let's include that in there too then.
Yes. Yeah. Whole spectrum for sure. I know in my work with clients, because like I work with individuals, with single people, with dyads, with triads, with more, that every single time I think that I've seen every possible configuration, like somebody comes along with something entirely new that they have figured out. So of course we have, like we're all familiar with the trope of the throuple. And then I described the whole interconnecting dyads thing. But there's also this whole spectrum of people who practice what's known as relationship anarchy, where sometimes, I've seen situations where it's like, I want to raise a child, but I don't want to raise a child with a romantic partner. I would much rather co-parent with my best friend that's been my best friend for life, and we share a lot of the same values. And so we're going to choose to live together, co-parent a child together, but then we're also both going to have like separate romantic relationships and like that really turns a lot of things on its head of like, is this monogamous? Is it non-monogamous? It's also got like a platonic element to it. Like, what does that all mean? Right? So there's like all kinds of variations under that umbrella there. And then of course, there's also a lot of people in like the lifestyle, like the swinger community who, to speak in very, very rough terms, it's like people who might lean more on this like emotionally monogamous end of the spectrum, where they kind of want to create like this more emotionally focused like couple unit, but that we also maybe we get a hall pass to play around with each other, or maybe the two of us go on cruises or go to resorts or whatever, and we play with other couples and things like that.
And use the pineapple, apparently.
Exactly. The upside down pineapple.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think something that's been really interesting is when we started the show, we thought there was a bigger difference between the swinger lifestyle community and then the polyamorous community. And we've learned that actually there's less so, and it becomes less and less all the time. So when we've talked to people who do swinger podcasts, when we've done interview swaps with them, we find that a lot of people who've been in the lifestyle for more than a year or so, almost all of them, in my personal experience, this is not science research, but anecdotally, almost all of them at some point, as you start asking more questions, are like, we've developed some emotional relationships there too, or we've had these particular partners who we've had for a long time and who came to our, son's birthday. And it's like we have this illusion that there's this total separation on the swinger side, and then there's this everybody always all together at the same time on the polyamory side. And really neither one is like that extreme very often, or at least not for very long. It tends to kind of open up and the lines can get blurred.
I want to dive into this even more, but before we do, let's take a quick break to hear from our partners.
When was the last time you actually checked the ingredients in your dishwasher pods? Spoiler alert, they're full of chemicals and microplastics that can stay on your dishes even after they've been washed. And studies show that this residue ends up inside of you, causing inflammation and gut damage. But Blue Land's dishwasher detergent tablets are 100% plastic-free and made with certified clean ingredients that are safe for the whole family. In addition to the dishwasher tablets, I've also been enjoying the hand soap tablets. They're so easy to use. Just fill your reusable bottle with water, drop in the tablets, and wait for it to dissolve. And it comes with a foaming pump and a fantastic clean scent. Blue Land is on a mission to eliminate single-use plastic by reinventing cleaning essentials to be better for you and the planet with the same powerful clean you're used to. Now, Blue Land has a special offer for our listeners. Right now, get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/dateable. You won't want to miss this. blueland.com/dateable for 15% off. That's blueland.com/dateable to get 15% off. Has it ever felt like you're doing everything right, eating healthy, working out, but your energy still crashes? Or your mood swings hit out of nowhere? I know I have. What I've learned is that a lot of these issues are tied to changes in my hormones. That's where Happy Mammoth comes in. They offer a free 2-minute quiz that can help you uncover the root cause of your hormonal symptoms. It's super easy. Just answer a few questions. And you'll get a personalized recommendation to help support your hormones and start feeling better. From the hormone quiz, I learned that my estrogen rises and falls unevenly. So the solution is Hormone Harmony, which could help with bloating, anxiety, fatigue, overwhelm, and more. Ready to start feeling like yourself again? Head over to happymammoth.com and take their free 2-minute hormone quiz today to find the ultimate answer to your stubborn hormonal issues. And for a limited time, you can also get 15% off your entire first order with our code Dateable at checkout. That's happymammoth.com and use the code DATEABLE for 15% off today. Does it feel like most healthy snacks just taste so bland? Well, I think I may have found the perfect healthy snack. Washington Red Raspberries. They're a clean, simple, and seriously delicious way to add more nutrients to your day. So get this, they're American grown, picked at peak ripeness, and frozen within hours to lock in nutrients like fiber, antioxidants, and vitamin C. And I love to toss them in a smoothie or a yogurt for breakfast or eat them as a healthy treat throughout the day. Grown with care by American farmers in Washington state, frozen Washington Red Raspberries are one of the best kept secrets in the freezer aisle. Make sure to always check the label for American grown frozen raspberries. Want to discover new ways to use American frozen red raspberries and get more details on where you can grab a bag of these delicious berries? Go to redraz.org. That's redrazz.org. You'll find recipes, healthy tips, retail locations, and everything you need to make frozen Washington Red Raspberries a regular part of your routine.
I think something else worth pointing out, and we actually did a whole episode talking about some of the different labels that have been come up with to describe it. But so if you imagine that interlocking dyads that we mentioned, right? So if we go back to the quad situation of Jace and Emily are dating, Emily and Dedeker are dating, Jace and Dedeker are dating, Jace has another partner, Emily has another partner, Dedeker has another partner. Let's say that kind of configuration. Within that, there's also the question of how involved in each other's lives are we? Mm-hmm. And there's kind of the most separate, which is generally called parallel polyamory, which is like you've got your relationship, I've got my relationship, but they don't really have anything to do with each other. Besides, obviously, scheduling has to come up now and again, and like conversations about safer sex and those sorts of things. Like that all has to come up. But for the most part, we operate totally separately. And then there's what's called kitchen table poly, which is like we all have our separate relationships, but we might all have breakfast together. Or, we're all friendly. We can sit around the kitchen table. Or there's what's called lap sitting poly, which is more like we all cuddle and hang out. And that's more the image I think people think of because that's what the media shows us a lot of is more that lap sitting.
Like everyone's having sex all the time.
Yeah. Right, everyone's touchy, cuddly all the time. Yeah.
Just constantly.
And then there's all sorts of permutations and variations of those. There's some people who try the like, I don't even want to know that you have other partners. Like, it's okay that you have them, but I want you to hide that from me. There are some people that do that. We find it tends to not work very well because even if they're telling you to keep a secret from them, keeping a secret from your partner is uncomfortable and weird and leads to bad feelings most of the time.
I did want to bring up solo polyamory as well, because we haven't touched on that. And that is more where you tend to center yourself as opposed to a relationship or hoping to find a relationship where you would be nesting with someone, for instance. It can take a lot of different forms, but you are actively sort of putting yourself at the center of your life as opposed to someone else. And that might mean, you don't share finances with a person. You don't want to cohabit with a person. Maybe you're doing things in your life like I'm trying to get a PhD right now and that's taking precedent decision over other relationships. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to have very committed relationships, but they may just not have the traditional markers of, this is what a successful relationship is. This is kind of the milestones that we're hitting. Instead, it might look a little bit different than that. So I do think that that's something that's happening more and more, where people are deciding, maybe if I put myself in a relationship in a specific way, I lose a sense of self, and I don't want to do that. So instead, I'm choosing to be solo polyamorous, for example.
So I have a burning question. It's been back in my mind for a while now. I'll give you the background of this. My first exposure to non-monogamy was in college, where there was an older woman in a class that I was in who was in an open marriage. And she always talked about how she lived with her husband and their girlfriend. And she always said how wonderful it was because they got to hang out together, got to go to family reunions together. And then one day the girlfriend got pregnant and she was like, fuck this, I'm getting out of this marriage. This doesn't work. So my question was, does non-monogamy it doesn't work? And that was my naive way of asking a question of like, did this not work for you? And she said, no, Yue. Relationships work until they don't. It was such a memorable moment for me because now I look at non-monogamy because, society likes to look at non-monogamy under a microscope. Like it's a lab project experiment. And when things don't work, people go, oh, it's because non-monogamy doesn't work. But nobody looks at monogamy. And when people break up, they don't go, oh, it's because monogamy doesn't work. Yeah. So it feels like non-monogamy is an extension of all relationships. Like even the different types of non-monogamy you just described could also apply to monogamous relationships. So my burning question is, are there, if there are, any problems that are specific and unique to non-monogamous relationships that don't actually apply to monogamous relationships?
That's a really wonderful question. I just really want to highlight that I feel like you've understood everything that we're always trying to convey with our show and have for like decades and haven't always been able to get across to people. Because I think that was part of the learning curve for us, that we started from this place of we're going to make this like special polyamory show to give special polyamory advice to special polyamorous people. And I think within a year even started realizing, oh no, a lot of this is just like about all relationships in general. A lot of this is not necessarily special.
So
I was going to leave it open. I could give a 2-hour TED talk talking about this. I just don't want to. I wanted to leave it open for Emily or Jace to hop in before
I'll jump in real quick. Yeah. I think something that comes up in non-monogamy, it kind of forces you to look at things that you just simply wouldn't have to look at if you were only monogamous. And what I mean by that is confronting the fact that your partner is going to be sleeping with someone else, for instance, and that you know about it and that you consented to it. And that, I think, can bring up a whole host of emotions. And if you are truly strictly monogamous and not sleeping with anyone else, you're never going to have to confront that. So I do think that there are specific things within like that realm that you're like, shit, okay, I'm feeling jealous in this way, but I have consented to this happening. Right. I am okay with it. From a sense of like, I have said that I'm okay with it. I've said that it's fine for my partner to go do these things. How do I deal with my own jealousy? How do I deal with sitting there on the couch while my partner's on a first date having fun? Because I am having all of this emotional flooding going on. I need to figure out how to self-soothe. I need to figure out, like, what can I be doing to not immediately when they walk in the door, confront them in an angry tone or whatever it might be. How can I make this okay for myself as well? And then vice versa, watching a potential reaction happen with them when you go out with someone else. So I think that those are very non-monogamy specific things that get easier over time. But even sometimes, being in a relationship, being in non-monogamous relationships for years, and then realizing for whatever reason, some person triggers a deep insecurity within you that you didn't even know was there. And you're like, shit, what is it about this person that's causing me to feel this way? So I think it's just a lot of constant internal work as well that might not be present if you weren't confronted with these things in the ways in which you are in non-monogamy.
And I think that's the key there, kind of like we were hinting at before, is that within monogamy, you can kind of get away with not confronting these things, even if really you'd be better off if you did confront them, right? So it's funny, I was going to say, like, I think that the hard part is that non-monogamy involves a lot of unlearning, more than learning even, it's unlearning, or kind of teasing apart what are the things that I feel or believe just because I was taught those were normal versus what things are actually mine, and like what things can change or what things are just, this is my ingrained personality versus how much of this is just because I was taught, oh, if your partner does that, it means you're not lovable. Get all these lessons from our media, from our parents, from people in our lives. And it's funny, in thinking about it, I kept trying to come up with specific examples, but with all of them, it's like, no, there's times though where that'll surprise you. Like Emily was saying, it could surprise you when your husband or wife makes friends with some coworker that for whatever reason makes you feel really insecure. And you don't know if it's them, if it's you, if that can happen. I just think you confront it sooner and you're sort of expected to deal with that in non-monogamy. Whereas in a monogamous relationship, you might just get really jealous and shitty and be like, well, that's my right to tell you who you can and can't be friends with. End of story. I didn't have to grow. I didn't have to deal with it. You had to deal with it. And maybe you keep going on and have a relationship and that's okay. And maybe that starts to damage shit in a way that can't get fixed. But it's like less immediate that you have to deal with it right then.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And, you know, like even in our book too, we talk about for monogamous folks as well of really confronting like the shoulds and, you know, is this just society telling me to act this way and to believe that's how it all works? Or is it truly what I want? But I can see from what you were saying, Jace, of that you're just forced to kind of think about it faster and where it's a nice to have versus a must have. I'm curious, like, as you were all in your own journeys, like what were you confronted with that you were like, nope, not for me, or like maybe a date fail or something that made you be like, okay, this isn't working, or I want to go this direction?
So I've had many moments where I feel that my ideals have bumped up against reality. And I do think a certain amount of like adulthood and maturity lives at that intersection of where our ideals crash into reality and then figuring out like, what do we do then, right? And so what I mean by this is I'm remembering a conversation that I had with an ex-partner of mine, and this was like relatively early on in my journey where I was still carving all this out and figuring out what was for me, what wasn't for me. And it was a conversation around going on trips with other partners where I was in a space where I was like, well, I myself personally, I'm interested in that being an option on the table, right? Like I'm developing multiple like emotionally entangled relationships, and the idea of being able to go on a weekend trip feels good, you know, or go on vacation with different partners feels good. When I think about my partner doing that, it freaks me the hell out, you know, and I feel already like very insecure and unsure. And I remember us having that conversation of having to acknowledge that reality of the feelings, but then also exploring the alternative of like, okay, if we follow the feelings and then have the feelings decide, okay, we'll just agree like no travel with other partners, that also for me really rubbed my further wrong way as far as my value system was concerned, right? Because I knew, even though it's scary to think about this being equal opportunity, right? To think about if I have the freedom to travel with other partners, that means my partner does as well. I would still rather confront my own feelings and insecurities. I'd rather seek my partner for like reassurance on those things rather than choosing to decide like, okay, fine, like all my other relationships are going to have kind of this arbitrary cap on it of like what behavior is acceptable or not. This is brushing up against a deep, like philosophical conversation that's been going on for decades within the non-monogamy subculture around things like hierarchy, right? Or like, is it ethical to decide, okay, I have one partner who is going to be the default most important partner and then everybody else is secondary. Is it ethical for me to decide that ahead of time? Or is it more ethical for me to feel like I'm trying to create more equitable relationships and more even playing fields? And there's like a lot of debate back and forth around like what format works for people. And so for me, that was a very formative moment of kind of realizing like, no, I think I kind of actually want to lead into my value system here that feels more right rather than just like letting my own kind of insecurities drive the bus.
Well, also, yeah, for Jason and Emily, what about I think jealousy is the first word that most people think about when they think about non-monogamy. How do you confront those feelings?
It so often just stems from stuff that's happening internally. And to me, I've been in a relationship with someone now for about 8 months, and he has been dating people a little bit here and there, or just like doing one-off sleeping with people. And I really haven't done a lot of that. I just don't have a lot of time, honestly. So with that, I've had to confront being now in a non-monogamous setting after a very long time of being monogamous again. I have had to deal with some jealousy there and some just visceral body physiological reactions of like, what is going on here? Why do I feel this at the pit of my stomach? And so often, if I try to look at what are the things that I'm really actually fearful of here, and at the end of the day, it doesn't really stem from worrying that he's going to run off with this new person that he just slept with, but more it's like, okay, what if I extrapolate this potential relationship out here, it might mean, for instance, that it would take some time away from me and away from the things that we might be wanting to do together. So if I look at that, I think what I'm really longing for here, what I really want is A, reassurance, and then B, just quality time with this person. I want to make sure that quality time is present in my relationship, and that assurances of I matter to him, I'm somebody that is meaningful in his life, and that, him sleeping with someone else doesn't take away from those things. And we've, I think, had great discussions after any time that he sleeps with someone else, and been able to kind of have those reassurances. And so it has made anytime that does happen a lot easier for me, and to the point where I'm like, okay, did you have fun? How was it? Kind of thing. Do you think that you're going to see this person again? I can ask more those questions as opposed to feeling like, holy shit, this really, really is going to maybe damage me somehow or our relationship. Instead, I'm able to kind of look at the bigger picture and ask myself, like, what is it that I'm worried about here? And what is it that I truly want? And how can I ask for that thing from my partner?
Yeah, I would say for me, going back to the unlearning thing, I think is such a big part of it when it comes to, those feelings of jealousy of, what is it that I'm feeling? Is it because I was taught, if your woman sleeps with another man, that means you're less than other men somehow, right? Like there's so much of that shit that gets put into boys' heads from a very early age. I think we all get our own versions of that, but I think some of unlearning that's hard. I think that also comes with the territory of once you actually start trying to understand your own sexuality a little more and are less rigidly holding to some specific label or some specific title of like, well, if I say I'm this, but then I do this, then that doesn't fit. And it's like, just chill a bit more. Like just figure yourself out first, figure out labels later. Like don't worry about, I'm not fitting this label anymore. But I do think we get a lot of pressure for that. I think that men and boys especially get a lot of pressure to fit a specific label. Well, we think it's specific, but no one could quite pin it down for you. But a specific label of like what being a man means, what being valuable as a man means. Like it's a complicated thing, and that's maybe a whole bigger discussion for another podcast. But I think figuring that out, figuring how my relationship works to other men that are dating women or men that I'm dating. I have also dated some men as well, even though most of my partners have been women. So I think that's a piece. I do want to say also an interesting change to point out with Dedeker's story about having struggles with, my partner's going to go out of town with this other person. I feel jealous about that. I feel challenged about that. I think a lot of that comes down to just we think that's weird, like we're taught that that's weird, and can come down to feeling insecure in the relationship itself. And if you have more of a secure base there, and that's not something you can just get overnight, right? That can take time and building trust and having some history in your relationship. But to fast forward to the last several years of my relationship with Dedeker, where she would spend 3 months at a time living with a different partner in a different country from me. And that was just our normal. And that's like, okay, cool. Like, see ya. You know, we'll start to miss each other after like, you know, especially after a month was kind of that like, man, this sucks not seeing you. And after 3 months is like, okay, it's time now. And then she would do that back and forth on both sides, kind of spending 2 or 3-ish months. And then sometime on her own, you know, with me and the other partner she was dating at the time who lived in different countries, where like that's natural and comfortable and was never this question of like, oh, I wouldn't let you do that. Or like there was never a thought of I would want to stop you from doing that. But that would have been really hard early on. Something
I want to highlight that I wanted to touch on earlier in this conversation, actually, and it's for some reason this tends to really get left out of the conversation about non-monogamy, which is that having a relationship that's non-monogamous from the beginning is very different from opening up a monogamous relationship. Some of the challenges are similar, for sure. Like everybody has to deal with things like insecurity and figuring out how your relationship functions, but I would by and large say that I think that if I was in a monogamous relationship with someone for several years and then decided we're going to open up and we're going to put all this on the table and it's going to be like totally fine for you to go live with somebody else and we're going to go travel with other people, like that would be a lot harder versus all of my romantic relationships for the past like 15 years plus have all started out non-monogamous and the challenges have been different in that way. And in my personal opinion, I feel like it's, you know, it's an easier learning curve when you start out that way rather than when you're having to make that big hairpin turn.
Right. And people do it, but it's just a harder transition because you're going from such a different paradigm to another.
Yeah. I'm glad that you all pointed that out because I do think that is important. I'm curious though, last time when we all spoke on your podcast, we were talking about like how many people to date at once, for instance. And a lot of you were saying that one time I dated a ton of people or had relationships with a ton of people. And then it became a lot with work and stuff. Like, was there ever any like boundaries of like, I can only date X amount of people at a time? Or this type of behavior with someone was not right for me, stuff like that.
I feel like the only thing that I would not allow in my life is just, you know, bad behavior on either end or, you know, a person that made me, for whatever reason, feel like I wasn't safe in the relationship. And that to me is the biggest offense. I can't think of like any particular thing that would happen in non-monogamy that would make me be like, no way, I'm not going to do this. It's, you know, stuff like agreements that you need to collaborate with a partner about. And if somebody is breaking those agreements all the time, like, you know, we choose to tell each other when we sleep with someone, for instance, we wear protection all the time, we get tested every 3 months, things like that. If that's not happening, then yeah, that's not okay. And that would not be a partnership that I would want to be in. If you are not choosing to communicate openly and vulnerably and honestly, then yeah, that's not a relationship that I want to be in. But in terms of like very specific non-monogamous things, I'm trying to rack my brain and like I can't think of anything particularly. I don't know about the two of you.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on it where it's like there's behaviors a person might do that are unacceptable, but they'd probably be unacceptable in monogamy as well, right? It's kind of more about learning what you're okay and not okay with in terms of how people go about communicating and getting what they want and all these things. I mean, I know that, you know, we've talked before with you two when you were on our show about how many people you date and that, yeah, like you don't have infinite time, right? Some might say that time is the only resource that's truly finite, that we can't get more of, and that everyone has the same amount in a day, at least. We don't know how much we have total, but it's, you know, a little bit of a crapshoot there. So yeah, I mean, dating too many people is too many people. That just depends on your life. I fully plan, like once I'm retired, then it's going to go nuts again. Just tons of dating because I'll have all the time in the world.
Love it.
How many people could you like typically handle nowadays? I guess like with life the way it is. Two tops.
Yeah,
absolutely. Me too. Two tops right now. Yeah.
But there were times where, like back when we were in that quad, where I would usually have 3, maybe 4 at a time. I think Dedeker usually had 3, maybe 4. Emily probably similar.
Yeah, I was trying the most intense time of dating. It was like the quad and then maybe 2 other people. So yeah,
like 5 total. Yeah.
yikes. So many people. I can't even fathom that
Because
now.
we were like young and energetic and all of us underemployed. And
That's
what else are you going to do in Los
kicker.
Angeles in 2015 or whatever?
Yeah.
You're going to go nuts.
Yeah.
I can see some of our monogamous listeners asking this question. Do you ever feel the pressure to seek out connections? Because I guess if you're a monogamous dater, you could just be like, I'm taking a dating sabbatical right now. I'm not looking for anything. But I can see a scenario where you're with someone and they're actively dating and you feel like, oh, I probably should be actively dating other people too.
I think it depends. Like my partner just ended a relationship, but he was actively dating someone else for a while as well. And part of me was like, yeah, I should find someone, but I'm so busy. I don't know. Like it's more if something is convenient in my face right then. Like last night I was out with some friends and ended up making out with a woman, in the bathroom, and it was really fun and awesome. And that happened to be something that, was a cool thing that occurred like that night. Will I see this person again? Hopefully, but I don't know if it'll be, a real intense relationship. It may just be like casual and fun. So I think like currently I have time in my life for something that I'm more committed to and some potential casual and fun stuff. Even like the prospect of like a second really committed relationship right now seems like a lot for me. But that was very different at a different time in my life, and it might be again.
Mm-hmm. To get to the heart of your question, I think there can sometimes be this pressure if you identify with this label of polyamorous, but then you're just with one person. There can kind of be like, oh, am I not poly enough? Like, am I not, it's like people run into that with like, oh, am I not bisexual enough? Am I not queer enough? Am I not straight enough? Whatever it is, kind of goes back to that idea of holding less tightly to labels, that just kind of let yourself be what you are. That's easier said than done. But I'll say for myself that for the past several years, I haven't really dated much at all. And, I've just been in my relationship with Dedeker. She's had other partners, including this one that she was traveling for several months of the year at a time to go see. And that was fine and that was good. And like Emily said, feeling like I was busy. I also, my best friend had a baby. And so I was excited getting to be the godfather to the baby and helping out. And that was during the pandemic too. And starting new relationships during the pandemic was rough. So just due to a variety of circumstances, I wasn't dating, but it wasn't like a resentful not dating. It was just, I'm just not looking for that as much right now. I'm open to it. And I have been, and I have someone who I'm just kind of starting to date now. We'll see how that goes, but it just hasn't been my focus. And so I guess it's more that, like, rather than taking a sabbatical from it or saying I've quit dating or something. But I do want to give a quick shout out to monopoly is the term for it, where you might have a relationship where one person does have multiple relationships and the other chooses not to. They just say, I'm monogamous with you, but I'm also okay with you having other partners. That doesn't bother me. And that's called monopoly is the term for that, with the caveat that if you're the one who wants to have the other relationships and you want to find that mono person, I'd actually call that just kind of being a jerk who wants to not have to do any work yourself, but get everything that you want and have a partner who makes that happen for you. However, if you are the person who is the monogamous one and it's like, no, my values really line up with non-monogamy. I think it makes sense to me. This is how I want to live my life. I also just don't have interest in that. Maybe I'm more demisexual or demi-romantic. Like I don't feel that urge as much, but it aligns with my values. Those are the times when it can work and not just be a shitty thing that someone's doing that leads to resentment down the road.
So I said I wanted to go back here, and I'm going to go back here, of going from non-monogamous to monogamous. And Emily, I know that you mentioned that was your situation. Is that something you see happen often, or what's your take on the whole bit?
I do think people absolutely go back and forth depending on kind of the relationship that they are in. There are certain people that say, no way, I am always going to be one or the other. Polyamory is intrinsically a part of me. I am, polyamorous through and through. That's a part of my identity, and I couldn't dream of being monogamous again. And there are people who, of course, would never want to be polyamorous, who are only ever going to be monogamous. There's another term called ambiamorous, which generally means that you are okay in whatever relationship configuration kind of fits the relationship that you are in. So that's a collaboration with your partner, talking about what is it that I actually want? What is it that you want? How are we feeling about the possibility of opening up this partnership or closing it for whatever reason? I was non-monogamous with that partner for a short amount of time, but it was very much like a one penis policy thing. That means he did not want me dating men, only women, which there's a lot of not great stuff with that type of configuration, of course. In my opinion, maybe some people would say that, oh, that's perfectly okay, and that's what we agreed upon. And yes, while I agreed to it, I didn't particularly like it, but that is what I did. And then even after a time, me dating women was not okay either. So we fully closed up that relationship. And I think for myself, one of the things that I have realized throughout the course of that 9-year span of dating this person was how much I tended to kind of diminish myself and put myself more and more in a box of what he would be comfortable with or happy with. And that was me choosing to be monogamous ultimately. And now that I am not in that relationship anymore and moved across the country and restarted my life in many ways, I am sort of coming back to the person that I've always wanted to be, and know the best relationship style for me is one that is not so rigid as monogamy and that offers the possibility of dating more than one person at once. So I do think that absolutely, to answer your question, people do move back and forth. And, maybe I'll be in a relationship again where it's like, no, it makes sense for me to be monogamous, or it makes sense at this point in my life to only be with one person. But I do think that personally, for me, I probably will always want to have the possibility of being open in some sense, because that works best for who I am. And I think, Jason Dedeker, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know, like, Jace, you had a span of quite a few years where you weren't dating anyone else, where you were functionally monogamous, but you still knew that you were polyamorous, and that's the only relationship configuration that you want in your life, even though you were, for a time, only dating Dedeker.
Right. Yeah. To go back to with the mono-poly thing, for me, it's that non-monogamy lines up with my values. It's like once I started learning about it, it was just like, yes, this makes sense with essentially how I want the world to be, right? Like how I want people to be able to treat each other, have relationships. Like that just clicked for me. And so that's part of that, even when it's been challenging or when there have been hard times, or even if I'm not actively dating and not really looking for that's still there of like, no, but this lines up with my values. And I would even argue in that mono-poly situation, I've often said, I actually think the polyamorous one is the one not dating anyone else and is okay with their partner dating other people. And the one who claims they're the poly one is actually kind of more monogamous in that situation. In a certain extent, I'm being a little bit cheeky to try to challenge people. That sense of, I think it's less about what you're doing and more about what are the values you bring to a relationship with someone else and what are the things that you expect are acceptable from that other person.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I have a friend who on paper would say she's in an open marriage, but she has never been with anybody else while in this marriage. And she said it's a mindset that she really wanted from the beginning. Yeah. And she doesn't know if her partner has been with other people. She doesn't really care. But her thought is, if I'm drawn to a certain energy, I will go with it. But I haven't been drawn to anybody yet. What do you think? Like, is that dangerous zone, or is that kind of like how many people can think about their relationships?
I mean, the only thing that I would say is quote unquote dangerous about that is that, like, if there hasn't been enough discussion between herself and her partner around what does this actually mean, what does this functionally mean, that like maybe they could be setting themselves up for we stumble into what we actually want or don't want, right? Like, you know, she does go have a hookup and then we suddenly realize, ooh, that was actually really scary and I didn't like that. And maybe there's enough resilience in the relationship to be like, hey, let's regroup and, you know, hash this out a little bit more in detail. But it does make me think of, so for several years, for a span of about 6 years, I was doing this like super high functioning polyamorous Carmen Sandiego act of where, you know, I was living like for part of the year with Jace and I was living for part of the year with this other partner who happened to live overseas, and I'd kind of go back and forth. You know, I actually really enjoyed that. And like, obviously it really racked up all my airline miles.
That sounds perfect.
Really good airline status. But, setting aside, obviously it's like the time and inconvenience of having a partner who lives in another country, I did really enjoy having that sense of like creating like this kind of cohabiting life with multiple partners. And then that all came crashing down when, you know, my partner who lived overseas, like we had a breakup. This was a couple of years ago. That relationship came to an end. And all of a sudden, I found myself going from like international woman, non-monogamous woman of mystery to I'm living with one partner monogamously in the suburbs. And oh my God, like I'm a normie now. And
with Jace. This is with Jace.
Yeah. And because Jace, you know, Jace's last relationship had ended right before the pandemic and he wasn't dating anybody. And I had this like newly, you know, freshly broken heart and I was not ready to rush out and start dating anybody. And it was a really weird time where I definitely did have this crisis of like, oh my God, like, am I polyamorous enough? Does this even make sense? Should I be trying to date more people? I really am not excited about that because I feel like I need to grieve and I need to mourn. And so that lasted for about a year where Jace and I were again, like functionally monogamous, like de facto monogamous. But it was not a year where we didn't sit down and we're like, okay, we're monogamous now. Like, let's be monogamous. Like, let's agree to close up the relationship. It was just like functionally neither of us dated anybody, but it was still present in our relationship. And part of that is because we were recording a podcast every single week. But outside of the podcast, it was still present in that it's like we still would check in about that. We would still talk about our attractions to other people, or we'd still kind of unpack stuff that had happened in the past with other partners, or we'd still unpack the feelings we both had about ourselves dating, or the feelings we had about the other person dating again, or things like that. Like, it was never this binary, okay, it's closed now and we don't think about it or talk about it. It's just kind of that's what happened to be the circumstances. And so I didn't necessarily feel like, oh, I'm in my monogamous year. It was just like, no, I'm still me. I'm still non-monogamous me. I'm just have one partner right now.
So this is going to sound really heteronormy of me, but I'm going to ask it anyways. So when I hear the story of like, Chase, you're at home, and Dedeker, you're with another partner and across the world doing all the things.
Carmen Sandiego, yeah.
I feel like, again, this is heteronormative, but I would feel like, or just the way monogamy we're told, I would feel like I was being left behind. Like, my partner is out there doing all the things, progressing another relationship. And I know that's the way that people think about like the relationship escalator of things, you know, continuing to go up with one person. I thought it was interesting that you all did an episode recently about this too, how it is like this area that kind of like is looked down upon, but then some people still want it. What's your takes on like the relationship escalator and moving something into a more committed partnership? I don't know if that's even the right term, but just curious on all of your takes, because that's how we think about it as monogamous folks.
I would say, and kind of the point we were trying to make on that episode, and you should go check it out, listeners, if you want to, but was kind of looking at, you know, like, what are the things on the relationship escalator, right? So it's like things like living together, things like intermingling your finances, things like getting married, having children, et cetera, right? There's all sorts of different little steps along the way as well. That I think the point of criticizing the relationship escalator is not so much to say any of those things on their own are bad, but that this assumption that a relationship can only move in one direction, that's why it's an escalator and not just stairs, is this idea that, like, to tell a real life story, I remember years ago, a friend came to me and was having some challenges in his relationship with his girlfriend where they were trying to figure out, like, we ended up living together because she lost her job. And so we lived together for a little while for financial reasons, but not sure that we really want to keep doing this. Like, do we need to get a bigger place? If she finds a job, what would that open up? And he was kind of debating all this. And I said, well, she's getting a new job. What about if you just went back to living separately like you used to? And his response was, oh, if we did that, we would break up. There's kind of this, and that's part of the assumption of the relationship escalator is if you tried to go backwards on it, you fall off the side, actually. You like the only way off is to jump off the side of the escalator. It's like if you try to take a step back, you just have to end the relationship or it's doomed, it's broken, it's falling apart. And so I think with that one little tweak of making it more like a four-dimensional staircase, you know, like
four-dimensional. Cool.
You know, I'm imagining like a Salvador Dali painting,
that's
or
what
you know,
Dali
an
painting.
Escher drawing or something, right? That it's more, you can pick and choose those individual pieces, right? Like you might decide, yeah, I do want to live with you, but I don't want to have a joint bank account with you. I actually think we'll be better off if we don't. That's actually how Dedeker and I do things. Like we do live together, but we don't have a joint bank account at the moment. There hasn't been enough reason to need one because with online banking, everything's so much easier and it gives us the feeling of autonomy over what we do and how we spend our money and things like that. Just as a small example, but feeling like you can pick and choose these things. And yeah, like I love romance and I cry at romantic movies all the time because I like what, like the feelings they represent, even if I don't like a lot of the values that they try to uphold or what they tell us is the only way to have true love.
Let's take a quick pause to hear from our sponsors.
What I keep thinking about is in my current partnership, he has 2 kids. And he spends a lot of time with these 2 girls. It's not much different than if he had another relationship. He's also trying to develop a connection. He's also putting a lot of time and effort into his daughters. But I don't feel the jealousy or the like, why aren't you spending time with me? But if you replace the girls with an actual other woman, yes, I would be feeling those things. And what you're talking about, the relationship escalator, it makes me feel like maybe that's just one big lie. Because if I were to pull back and look at my relationship, when he is farther along with his daughters, our relationship actually gets better. So we're all on this escalator together and all the relationships benefit from each other. But when he actually takes a step back with them, I feel the brunt of that too. Well, why is it that we can't think about these romantic relationships in the same way as these other just relationships that people have in their lives?
The secret is that we can. It just takes a lot of unlearning because of what you just described.
Okay, but I don't want to erase the fact that the image that you're laying out of if I replace the 2 daughters with another woman, that first of all, if we just want to examine the gendered aspect of it, is that we've all been socialized as women to feel competitive with each other and to feel like if another woman is exceeding in some way, like exceeding in the way how they look, how successful they are at work, how they perform or whatever, that's a direct judgment on me and my worth, right? So like I don't want to dismiss that. That's another thing to unlearn as well. That's another piece of unlearning that has to happen. And also, even with your partner and his daughters, you may be feeling the fact that, like, yeah, time is finite. And so, you know, how he chooses to spend his finite resources like time and money can affect you. It's not necessarily zero sum in the sense that, you know, time spent with his daughters means directly he's taking away from time with you. But there is an ecosystem there where it does affect each other, like you've highlighted. And I do think that to rewind a little bit to what we were talking about earlier about some of the unique challenges that come up in non-monogamies, I do think it forces people to maybe think more concretely about how their decision-making is going to influence multiple people and to have to take that in mind, that there is this whole ecosystem.
Where do all of you see your relationships headed in the next decade? Like we started off talking about
Decade.
Julie. A long time from now.
You're all like, we don't think like that. But we started off the convo of like how things changed from when you started the podcast.
You mean with our own relationships?
Yeah, with
each
your
other.
own relationships. I guess like, do you want like, I guess like, are there milestones that you're trying to hit in the relationship escalator, or is that not the way you're thinking about it at all? There's no right answer here. I'm just curious.
Okay. Yeah, this is reminding me of times in my life where I've had, two partners, and it feels like things are escalating with both of those partnerships, but, maybe not necessarily along those traditional milestones of, oh, we move in together and then we decide to get married, then we decide to have kids or things like that. Yeah, I did have to ask myself a question of like, if I'm not seeking these milestones, what milestones am I seeking? How do I know that this relationship is quote unquote moving forward? And we could probably even pick apart that whole notion, this idea that a relationship needs to be moving forward. But I digress. And I know for myself, and I think that this would apply to like my relationships with Emily and with Jace and with other partnerships that I have right now, that I'm just looking towards, am I progressing in the sense that I can show up as my full self in the way that I want to be in these relationships? Like, can I continue to feel like I can be more honest, more vulnerable? Can I feel like I can show up and support people when they need it? Like when they're going through an emotional crisis, or they're going through a financial crisis, or they're going through a housing crisis or whatever, do I feel like I can still be there? And so I guess for me anyway, it starts to transform more into like chosen family relationships. It's a little bit less important about, is it romantic, is it sexual? And it's a little bit more of like, who's in my chosen family and how can I show up for them? And yeah, do I feel like I'm able to communicate effectively in that way to facilitate that type of relationship?
If I could try giving the answer that's more critical of the question, I guess. So maybe that's what you're looking for. Well, no, I do think it's actually really interesting to think about such a long time horizon on a relationship of what are your goals for it? Like, where do you want it to go? And it is really interesting because I feel like in general, the three of us have not really talked about relationships in that way for quite a while.
Yeah.
And I think I want to take it like in two different directions. So on the one hand, something that is kind of one of our big tools that we share with people on our show is called Radar. And that's a little acronym for basically this monthly relationship check-in that you can have that keeps it more positive. It's about where do we want to go? How do we want things to be? What tweaks can we make this month? And then next month you get to check in and go, how did that feel? Was that better? Like, we tried that. We said we would go on a date every week and we didn't do it. We're too busy. Okay, let's figure out a different way that we can connect more. It's kind of this, you're constantly tweaking and adjusting the direction that the ship is going to make sure it's going in a direction you want, instead of setting this like much longer term goal and be like, yeah, set the GPS and we just go. You're kind of more gradually making adjustments and steering it to the place that you both are feeling good about it. And I think I would caution people. I don't think having longer term goals is necessarily bad, like especially if you have a really important goal of having children. I think that is one you do have to kind of plan for and try to set your life up for as best you can. Ideally, I guess you don't have to. You could just go out and do it. But, usually we want to do some planning, some prep for that. So I think that is something to plan ahead for. But so often I've seen couples where they have that kind of default mindset. I was in the same place of the goal is getting married, right? The goal is kind of creating that sort of household, and then the goal will be having kids. And there can be this thing where you sort of get through hard times because you're sharing a goal with each other. But the goal itself isn't really the thing. The goal is just like, okay, we got married. Oh no, now what? And then maybe a few years later, it's like, okay, well, what if we have a kid? Okay, cool. We're on a team again. We're having a goal now. And it's like, okay, we had the kid. Oh dear. Now what are we doing? That we can sometimes get distracted by a goal, especially if we're, type A goal-oriented people. Like actually, I think the three of us are, just not in our relationships, maybe. That it can be so easy to like just strive and work together to get to that thing because you love accomplishing, you love achieving things. But then the goal isn't really like a state that you want it to be in. It's just sort of like a checkbox that you checked. And now it's like, now what do I do? And hopefully people can figure that out. And that's why marriage counselors are great and why you should have one. It's really important to try to figure that out together. But I think often I've seen people get too sucked into the goal. So that's what I meant by being a little critical of the question.
I think right now I'm in a space in my life where I ended this extremely long relationship that, it meant, I think, that I was not being true to who I am. And now I'm trying to get back to a place where I am true to who I am. And I want to remain in that space for the next 10 years plus years, the rest of my life, hopefully. And so that kind of currently is my ultimate goal if there is one, and that relationships will, honestly, I mean, relationships don't always last, and that is okay. And I think that we have to just do them with as much integrity and care and compassion and hopefully great communication as we possibly can. And whatever shape those relationships take in my life, like, I want to be here for it and show up for them, but not define myself by them. And that's something that I've done for so long. And I'm trying to get out of that space. It's interesting when you change your life in a really fundamental way, when you ask yourself, like, what am I outside of my relationships with my friends, with a partner, with my family? Like, what am I outside of my relationship to my work? Like, who am I at the core? And I think that that's the most important thing that we should be focused on. And then hopefully be able to give that to the people that matter the most in our life, whoever they happen to be at any specific time.
I love that. I think that's so important for everyone to take away, whatever your relationship status is or configuration, all of it. I think this has been just such a wonderful conversation just to redefine relationships, and love the work that you're all doing to really challenge the norms. I think my biggest takeaway from this whole thing is, regardless of if you identify as monogamous or non-monogamous, you have the ability to define what works for you. And you all listed so many different configurations and pointed out that it doesn't need to just be non-monogamy when I made that slip. And I think that is so important to remember, that we get to write the rules of what we're doing. And also, I think what came up too is that just because you've decided that you want to try non-monogamy, it doesn't mean that you sacrifice your individual needs or what you want in a relationship. At the end of the day, that stays true regardless of how many partners you decide to engage. And I think the last bit that came up is just how we are in control of driving the ship and making the choices that ultimately work for us, and balancing do I need these long-term goals with what is going to make me happy?
I just feel like we need to get rid of the labels. The labels play into our identity. And when something's part of our identity, we feel like we have to live up to that identity. And I do think people who identify as monogamous, I think we're kind of screwed, because by identifying as monogamous, there are implicit rules, there's implicit judgment without discussion. So I do think, Jace, like what you were saying, many monogamous folks don't confront the real issues in relationships because there's this assumption that these rules apply and there's a right and a wrong, there's black and white. But they're very different for every relationship. I often think about my own past relationships. Infidelity was always a different definition for my partners. Yeah. And if I didn't have those conversations, we would have gotten into this very dangerous road of you're right, I'm wrong, I'm right, you're wrong, and pointing fingers. But confronting these really uncomfortable issues will actually make them more and more comfortable the more we confront them. So I think actually learning from the non-monogamous community is to bring up these situations, is to bring up what would it be like if you were to travel with someone else? Maybe it's not even a romantic relationship. What would it be like if I wanted to flirt with someone at a bar? What would it be like if one day someone paid for sex? I think these are real situations that we turn our heads away from. We turn our heads away from because there's so much shame attached to them, yet they're so real. So I really think getting rid of the identity of monogamous or even non-monogamous and just knowing that we got to live by our values and what's right for us in a relationship. And like what Julie was saying, being able to create the relationships that work for us. So thank you for this enlightening discussion about that. And hopefully this will be a great conversation starter for a lot of our listeners. Go have your talks with your friends over brunch, because I think there's a lot of nuggets here for discussion.
Well, thank you all for joining. Is there any last parting advice or things that maybe anyone that's considering non-monogamy should be aware of, in your opinions, maybe as a very quick lightning round?
Ooh, lightning round. Yes. Something I wanted to say earlier about the jealousy question was I look at jealousy as a sign that's pointing to something that needs to be healed. Like I see jealousy as something that is trying to help you out. And I think this applies that even if you're like Yue is suggesting, you're just having the conversations, right? Because sometimes even just tackling the conversation can bring up insecurity and jealousy. So I really encourage people to think of any jealousy or insecurity really as your friend who's trying to get your back, right? It's trying to point towards either there's something in you that's like really insecure that goes back to your childhood that's like been this deep wound that still needs to be healed, or there's something going on in your relationship where you're not being met in the way that you need to be met. Your needs are not being fulfilled in some way. But I think that would be my quick little bit of advice is like, look at jealousy as like your friend who's just trying to whisper in your ear to make sure that you're safe and that you're cared for.
You were talking, Yue, about how sometimes monogamous people don't have it right in a lot of ways because of all these preconceived notions of what monogamy is and what it should be. But I would encourage people, regardless of what type of relationship they're in, just to know that it is customizable for them and that you and your partner, or just you when you are single, can decide exactly what it is that you want in your relationship, regardless of what label you place on it. So even monogamy, that can look a very specific way. It can be a thing, hopefully, where you do talk about, I find this person really attractive. I think they're hot. I think it would be cool if we engage sometimes in, play with another person or whatever. Or I just want to be able to comfortably talk about the fact that I, had this really challenging time in my life with another partner and not have it be upsetting to you. Whatever it might look like, relationships are totally customizable, like you said, and we should be having these conversations with people because what one thing means to you may be very different than what it means to me. And we're not going to know that unless we have the conversation and communicate clearly.
I think the main thing I'd want to leave people with is that idea of customizability, that if you're listening to this and you found yourself like hyperventilating at some point going, oh God, my partner's going to live for 6 months with someone else in another country. Like that sounds like the worst thing ever. That's horrible. I remember when we were first opening up our relationship that Emily and I were reading books and things, but we were reading 2 different books. And so she would come to me sometimes being like, I just read about this thing in this book. This is what you want? Like, I don't know if I'm okay with that. I'm like, I've never heard this before. What are you talking about? And so I guess I would just want to emphasize to people that with the way that the media really loves to play up these group relationships, it's all orgies, it's all sex all the time. That's not generally what it looks like most of the time. And actually, you could have that in a monogamous relationship if you get into the lifestyle, and you'll probably have a lot more sex than you would have being polyamorous, if I'm being honest. So just realize there's all sorts of different ways you can do it and customize it. And it really all comes down to that communication and trying to get clear with yourself and realize that that can change over time too. That if you had told me right away my relationship would look like it does now, I don't think I would have wanted to go for it. But getting there over the course of the last 11 years, almost 12 years now with Dedeker, it feels natural and there wasn't any weirdness getting there. So I guess I would just say that it can be easy to look at a certain thing and think, oh God, it has to be that right away. I can't do that.
Yeah.
And I don't blame you. That would freak me out too.
Wow, so good. I mean, if we can customize our coffees the way we do today, why can't we do that for relationships?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
2 shots, oat milk, hold the sugar, little vanilla
Same
syrup.
thing.
It's the exact same thing. Well, thank you again for this great conversation. I can't believe we did it. 5 people, 5 voices.
Yeah.
It's a dateable record.
Yeah, I'm glad that we could be the ones to bring you here.
Yeah.
And we
You
still
can be
had such a great
non-monogamous too. If you can manage 3 podcast guests at once, you have the skills.
This was like the test, right? Can you
Exactly.
Can you sit through 5 voices in an hour? And then, yes, okay, you're cut out for non-monogamy. You're good. All right. If people want to find out more about multi-memory, where can they go?
We are on every podcast player out there, Multi-Amory Podcast, Rethinking Modern Relationships. We also have a book, Multi-Amory Essential Tools for Modern Relationships, and a new audiobook that is narrated by me. So go get that, pick that up wherever fine books are sold, and audiobooks as well. And you can go to our website, multiamory.com, or find us on Instagram at multiamory_podcast.
Where you three have some of the cutest photos ever. Like
Why, thank you.
I really enjoyed looking at your throuple photos.
Yeah,
gosh.
It's so funny.
Right.
It's like no surprise. Everyone thinks that we're still a triad, and then they get really disappointed when they learn the actual story.
That's okay.
All good. People can think whatever they want. They think Julie and I are dating sometimes too, which I mean basically are.
We still have like a podcast baby together, so here we go.
There's some label that you threw out today of that. Of like non-sexual life partner and other life partners.
Yes.
Chosen family.
It's a podcast Amory. That's what it is.
Yeah. There you go.
I love that.
Yeah, you're right.
So for our listeners, while you're searching Multi-Amory, why don't you give them a 5-star rating and review in Apple Podcasts? And you could do the same for our show as well. It means a lot to us to be able to sustain our shows for as long as we have. It is really riding on your ratings and reviews. So we really appreciate that. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this episode. Stay dateable.
Stay dateable.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful.
Stay dateable.